It's so hot outside that we're in the kitchen. I've come to the conclusion that I have a milk kefir problem. My milk kefir grains are so healthy that we end up with producing milk kefir at a rate that we simply can't use up. And rather than waste this fantastic kefir, I'm going to be setting myself a challenge. I want to see what else I can make from the kefir that I'd normally be wasting or even throwing away. I think with a bit of effort, I could create homemade versions of many of the things I normally buy. A staple in our kitchen is fresh butter, and so I decided I'd begin there. I took some milk kefir and a pot of double cream and I blended it in our food processor. I whizzed it to a really smooth, creamy consistency. I blended it a bit more until the liquid started to separate and it began to look a bit gritty and grainy. I carried on whizzing and waited for the splatter, which is always the point at which the butterfat separates from the actual buttermilk itself. I was really surprised at how easy this was. I don't think it took more than a few minutes to get to this stage. I then sieved the butterfat from the buttermilk and I worked the fat for a while to try and get as much of the butterfat to release from the buttermilk as I could, and then I needed to also then wash the butter. I then drained all of that water away, and all that's left to do at this point is just to add 1/4 teaspoon of really fine, good quality sea salt to the pat that you've made. You then chill that butter pat for about 30 minutes in the fridge and it's ready to go. Now I've poured the buttermilk into a jar because I was already starting to think of something I could use this for later. I decided I was going to make a homemade cheddar cheese quiche. Once the butter was chilled, I decided I wanted to shape it. Now you don't have to do this, but this is something I wanted to do. I spread the pat out on some greaseproof paper and then rolled it into a long sausage shape using a bamboo sushi mat. It's amazing how easy all of this was actually. Anyone could do this, and I'm not a chef. I'm a from scratch cook at home trying to use milk kefir to replace or improve on some of the products I'm buying all the time at the shops. This is amazing kefir butter. Why would I buy butter from the shops if I can make it myself? I don't think it's necessarily cheaper really, as I was still buying the double cream, wasn't I? But it's hands down a much better tasting butter overall, and I think it turned out really well. I'd already sneaked a taste of it, and it was really rich and it was very creamy, and I was trying to think of whether or not I could use this in a quiche, and yes I could. So I decided to go ahead and make a very plain, very simple cheddar cheese quiche with the buttermilk and also with the butter itself. Quiches are really fast to come together from scratch. First, whizzing up the pastry then. Flour, salt, kefir butter and water. I love how fast this recipe comes together. Just shape and chill the pastry, leave it for 30 minutes in the fridge, and then roll it out to 1/4 inch thick and to the size of the baking tin that you're using. So the first bake, I usually use a fork and I make some tiny little pinpricks in the surface of the pastry because that helps it cook faster. And I also like to trim off the top of the edge of the pastry so that it bakes really nice and flat. I also like to bake the pastry blind, and that means just pre-baking the pastry case before adding any of the wet liquid filling to it. You line the pastry with parchment and then you weigh it down with clay balls or rice. The idea is really just to stop the pastry from puffing up. I also include another step that a lot of cooks miss out when they're making quiches. I like to line the base of the pastry with some cheddar cheese. It'll set once it's baked and it forms the most delicious crispy cheese layer. The quiche custard is made from eggs and kefir milk and some of my kefir buttermilk that was saved from earlier. So I had these ingredients, so why not? I mixed it up well, I poured it into the partly baked pastry case, I added some more grated cheese for flavour, some seasoning, and popped it back in the oven for the final bake. That's it. It takes about 30 minutes or so, but because you can't always tell, different mixtures tend to set at different rates. I would say the better thing is just expect it to take more than 20 minutes, and you'll know when it's ready because the actual quiche custard itself doesn't jiggle anymore in the middle if you move the tin about. This is the finished quiche. I let mine rest for 5 minutes before I took it out of its tin. If you've enjoyed following along with me today, please consider subscribing to my channel and I'll take you along with me on my journey towards self-sufficiency.